Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to deal with a fairly common problem, and that's replacing the body on a Mitchell 300. And that problem is common because a lot of times folks will snap off the reel seat and then you're stuck. And this one's kind of close to my heart. A long time ago when I was a young lad and had a Mitchell 300, I had one of these snap. I actually had it snap right on the body here. And my dad, for the life of me, wouldn't go get another one. Probably didn't know how to do what we're going to do today, and just kept welding that on. And needless to say, they just kept welding it on. Sort of gives you an indication that it didn't hold very well. So here we're going to show you how to do that. If you have this problem, what you're going to need is a replacement body that has the reel seat on it. But also during this demonstration, we're going to show you how to rebuild the entire reel, because in effect, if you've lost the body, you have to take everything out of the reel in order to replace it. So I'm just going to clean up a little bit of some residual grease that's laying on this body. Just making sure it's nice and clean. There's no sense putting on something that is going to fail right away. All right. So we have to take the whole reel apart to get to this. This is the foundation, and you can't go anywhere without it, but you need to do that. So we start by taking off the handle. And you'll notice I'm wearing a glove, and I'm also using a parts tray. This is just some food container. Next off, we'll take the gear side plate off. These are just flat-bladed screwdrivers just for use. There's 3 of these. And we're going to reuse this side plate, but you have to disconnect the side plate from the reel body in order to do this. Then we're going to go to the top end. We're going to remove, we got the body. We'll clean this up while we're at it. There's some grease in there, so before we reinstall, we'll make sure all of this is clean. For that, I'm just digging out the old grease with a cotton swab. I'll pull out the core gear here, the one that drives the crosswind to go up and down the shaft. Pull out the slider. That's next. This slider is anchored in the axle. It holds the axle pin in. And this reel was operating sluggish, so chances are that the greasiness and pieces and parts need a good relubrication when we're done. So again, into my parts tray there. Once you have the slider out, you can pull the axle shaft out. Now, I did notice that there was some rub on the spool on the bottom here, pretty much all the way around. Sometimes that indicates that's a problem with the spool. Sometimes that indicates it's a problem with the axle. So when we go to reinstall that axle, which is going to be over here, we want to make sure that it slides easily up and down and we don't see any bend. This one seems to be doing just fine. You want to make sure that that slides, otherwise you'd have to replace the axle. And sometimes when you get a broken reel foot, probably happened because your reel was extended and something bumped, and it's always possible that you could have bent that shaft. So be careful of that if that's the situation you find yourself in. Next up then, we're going to remove that channel line. And then we'll come up top here and we'll take care of the rotor cup. Be careful with these screws. In this case, the body is bad, so you wouldn't have to worry too much if you broke a screw in there. You don't have to get a replacement screw. All right, and that's the back end of the carrier. So again, I'm going to just make sure this is nice and clean. It was sluggish, and when it gets sluggish, it's usually dried grease. So I'm going to make sure both sides are nice. You can feel it to your touch. both sides, because they're going to have to slide on that. And then I'm going to grab some real grease. I'm going to use some Penn Precision Real Grease here. Doesn't matter which brand you use, just make sure you use it. I'm going to make sure that I have grease on the back of the slide as well as the front of the slide as I reinstall. Also going to make sure I have grease in that channel. You don't want to put too much in there because it's going to bog it down if you do, but you do want to get grease in there. Then we can take the slide. The slide has a U shape and a channel. The U shape goes up top. Then you can center it on the holes for the side body, and we can reinstall those screws there. This is working on a new one now. This is another case where my hands are too big. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to put the screw in first. That'll get it started. At least it gets one started. And the other side, sometimes if you put grease on there, the grease will hold the spool, the screw as you go to put the second piece in. There we go. So that's part one. Then you want to transfer over the slide mechanism, channel. I know that there's a correct term for it, and that's not it, but you want to do that first. All right, we're set there. Okay, next up then you got to transfer the rotor. Some of you have seen that I have a tool. All I have to do is find it. There's a tool that Mitchell makes to take that nut out. If you don't have this tool, you can certainly use the deep socket, 12 millimeter deep socket. All right, this is done now. This is broken. That's no longer of any use. You can clean this up while we're at it. You don't need to take the bezel plate off or anything. You can. It just simply slides right off. Might as well do that. While you're at it, you can just check the dirt underneath here. I like to put a drop of oil onto the bale trip mechanism just to make sure that it's operating smoothly. In this case it is. We can transfer that over now to the new body, or the replacement body. It's not new. I'm going to put some grease into the channel where that's going to ride. While I'm at it, I'm also going to grease the gear that's on the bottom of the rotor. And again, I'm just brushing it on. I'm using an artist's brush. I've been frustrated by this artist's brush in that it's dropping hairs. Okay, we've got that back on. There's a little washer that comes on next. So there's actually two of them on this. Make sure that that they go on. And then there's a little sort of a keyway segment here. You want to make sure that's in the slot on the gear. And the raised side goes down, just like that. And then we can take that nut again, put that on. And then you can grab that with that ratchet. Snug it. Might be just a little too tight. You don't want to over tighten this. Okay, there you go. Pretty good. All right, now let's transfer over then. Let's clean this main gear case up. There's just a little bit of dried grease in here, so let's get that out of here. And we can go ahead and we can lubricate this. I'm going to put a little bit onto the core gears. And we're going to come over and make sure that this transition gear has grease on it as well. Last up then is to set the guide in place. There's only one side of this guide. It's got a point on it, or a stud. That's going to hold the axle shaft in place. And make sure that this gets nice and lubed, and also that there's some lube inside the channel guide. We're going to take our axle shaft, grease on everything now. Just put a little bit of grease onto the axle shaft, not too much. It'll clog the channels if you overload it. It seems like when there's bad performance with these 300s, it's because all the grease is dried. So that's understandable. These reels have been around a long time. If they fall into disuse, that'll happen. Okay, and then I'm just going to put a little bit of grease again onto the outside now, because that's where this gear for the planetary movement is going to go. And then I believe the way that this sets, I always get it a little bit wrong. You have to play with it. You take the 3 prongs, you lower this to the bottom, the 3 prongs go to the bottom. And then what I like to do is turn it by hand to make sure I have a full throw. So that's exactly what's happening now. If you put it in any other way, it's going to stick. It's not going to work properly, and then you're going to have nothing but problems later. Okay, then we're back to the side plate. Put that on next. Put the 3 screws in. And that's essentially how you replace a body that has a broken reel seat. We'll just make sure that this is working, just to demonstrate. But that's it for a Mitchell. So it's a very advanced engineering for the time, and even for today. There's very few reels that use a planetary gear system anymore. And in this case, this one has proved dependable through time. So, and my planetary, I may be off on calling it a planetary gear, but the system inside of it is definitely unique. It's not a crosswind block that simply goes up and down. The planetary gears I'm probably thinking of are like the 302, which had that the 2 inner working gears. You hear a little creak on that handle. I'm just going to put a little bit of penetrating oil on it to loosen it up, give that a ride. And we'll grab our spool. Work complete. There you go. We now have a Mitchell that's working the way it should with a full reel seat. So that's it. That's how you take the body off and reconstruct it by replacing it. It's also how you do the service on a 300 if you want to make sure that it's clean and long lasting. You want to make certain that all of those pieces are taken apart, cleaned, relubed, and reassembled the way that we did it here. So I hope you've enjoyed that. And with that, I'm going to thank you for watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you enjoyed it, please like it. Please subscribe to see more. We're always looking for new subscribers. Thank you again.